Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
DLA Piper and myself, Vincent Turner and Lucy, acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we meet and work on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We recognise the strength, resilience and capacity of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples and pay our respects to elders past, present and future. Thank you. So I just wanted to give you a little kind of context as to why we're here tonight. My name is Vincent Turner and I work with Lucy, who's over there in the orange. We decided we wanted to start a community firstly, and the podcast is really just a way of telling a story, but community actually is about bringing together people and telling these stories, this idea that there is a bunch of people now globally who are affecting change, and we think they're doing some really interesting work, and there's actually a lot of two things, really inspiring stories, and there's a lot to be learnt from these people. And we live in a world now where you don't have to sit in a room with someone like we're going to do tonight to actually record a podcast and to create a narrative. You can do that from all over the world. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Shape the System in a minute, but I just sort of wanted to just recount something that happened about 6 years ago. I was in San Francisco and I was running a financial services startup, or a fintech startup, I think you would call it now. And I got annoyed because I couldn't find the kinds of people who I wanted to connect with. And so I started a meetup, which is probably not as well-known term here in Sydney, but for those of you who are familiar with a meetup, it's basically get a bunch of people in a room around a particular topic. Anyway, I started a meetup for fintech, which wasn't really a thing, and had about probably a similar number of people as to here tonight who turned up for the first meetup, and most of them wanted me to help them with Google Checkout. And it was interesting because they had misunderstood what it was that we were trying to do, but ultimately we grew that meetup from the 25 so people in that room to about 5,000 people over the next 4 or 5 years. It turned into a community where we had hundreds of people every month who were turning up to be part of something larger. And ultimately, when we started Shape the System, we were actually interested in building community. We think there is a massive opportunity to be part of this narrative and to find these people and to tell these stories and to amplify these stories. And for two reasons. One is for information. We think they're interesting. We think people like Charbel, who we're talking to tonight, are solving interesting problems. But we also think that there's an opportunity to inspire people in the way that fintech wasn't really a thing 10 years ago and now is a massive thing. We think that living with purpose and having some idea of not only applying yourself to a problem in the pursuit of, some kind of successful business, if you want to put a startup lens on it, that's happening, of course, but people more and more are trying to find purpose. They're trying to find a reason why they should get up every day. And I think if we can tell some of these stories, we may also help people to rethink what they're doing for themselves as well. Cool. So that's a little bit about Shape the System. We've actually pre-recorded 8 podcasts already. Those will be going live. We've actually put the first one live today. So you'll be able to go to the website, shapethesystem.org or .com, they both work, and sign up, and they'll come out every couple of weeks. And part of this as well is if you've got an idea, if you think after listening tonight or listening to the podcast there's someone you'd love for us to interview, then tell us. And I think once you're here tonight, you'll get a sense of what we're trying to do. And yeah, I really appreciate you guys coming tonight and being part of the start of something. So thank you. Cool. On that note, I'm going to ask Charbel to come join us, and we will make a start. We're actually recording. It doesn't look like we are, but we're recording by virtue of a microphone that's in a room back out there next to a speaker. So I was talking to Rolando, was it? Ronaldo, sorry, my apologies. I got a few names tonight. And he was like, where are all the microphones? How's this podcast going to work? So it is a little gonzo style tonight. Hopefully it does work well. Anyway, without further ado, this is Charbel, who is reduced to a single name tonight. Charbel and I actually know each other because we got introduced by a company who I knew in San Francisco, and they said, hey, you got to go and meet this guy, Charbel. No real reason. It wasn't like I needed to do anything. He had a design company at the time, which he's now back doing full time. But they said, go and meet him, and I went and met him, and we needed an office at the time, and Charbel's first thought was, there's a guy next door who's leasing his office. You should go and have a chat to him. And I went and met that guy, shook his hand, and we moved in the following week on a handshake and worked out the details later. And hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of what Charbel's like. He's a connector, he's an innovator, he's an interesting guy, and working on some super interesting stuff. So we're going to start with what that stuff is. And I'm going to probably just hand over to you to talk a little bit about Saint Frankie and the Alt Saints. I think I've got that right. Want to understand a bit about is that working?
I'm not sure. Is that work?
Yeah, it works perfectly. Understand a little bit about what it is that you're doing with Saint Frankie and the All Saints, and we'll dive from there.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. I thought it was Thursday today, but it's not. It's Tuesday, so that's kind of how fast my brain wants to work this week, but it's not. Thanks for coming. So thanks for the intro. That was great. I do have a last name, but it's unimportant right now. So St. Frankie and the All Saints was, oh God, do you want to talk about how I got to this first, or what it is all about? Sure. So last year I decided to leave a company that I started, which is an education company, and had a few months off to decompress from the intensity of being. Is anyone in startup here? Right. So you can appreciate how intense life can be for a few years. You don't really pause very often. So I decompressed for a while, and in the decompression, it wasn't a chamber, but it kind of felt like that. It was at the beach most days. What I started to do was read a lot, and I started to read a hell of a lot about what is going on with the world. And there's no surprise. Everyone sees on social media what's happening. There's the climate change. We're looking at the talk of the sixth mass extinction around animals. We're seeing absolute destruction, clearing of land, the deliberate destruction of land for the sake of grazing and for our food, effectively, and also the spread of humans being urban development. And I started to pay particularly close attention to endangered animals. And that particularly started to trouble me because there's a whole lot of organisations around the world who are looking to do something about the critically endangered animals that we're seeing, and there's more and more added to the list almost weekly, which is quite terrifying. And what I started to see was, I'm a designer, effectively. That's what I do, and a foodie. What I started to see was people telling very, very complicated stories around what's going on. We're looking at, rhinos being slaughtered for their horns, elephants for their tusks, tigers for their penises, for some ridiculous superstitious medicine, things like that. And it was all really, really complicated. And what I started to look at was like, how do you actually look at this as a big message and distill it into something that has a bit of, not so much shock for the sake of shock, but distills what's really going on. So I started my own research and started building this database just because I had time. And it turned into this listing of 1,800 extinct animals, insects and plants. And what I wanted to get out of that was to look at what are the patterns in there, because, as a designer, I'm constantly looking for patterns. And what pretty much everything pointed to was humans, particularly in the last 50 years when we see what's happened with the spread of humanity. And population has just gone from a ridiculous level of like 3.5 billion 50 years ago to 7.8 billion now. And we're looking at 2030 for the population to be over 9 billion people. We're stressing the planet in a massive way, and it's no surprise. We know this stuff now.
I'm doing my bit by not having sex.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not even going to tell you how long it's been. But thank you for that. Do we want to get into any calendars? Are we looking? No, I won't get into that. How do we know this? Anyhow, so I kept going further and further into this, and so the extinction database, I have it; it's live on the website. But what I started to then look at was why are animals becoming extinct now? Where are the stress points? And again, it points to humans, but the themes in amongst that are poaching, because for trophies. So people, and you saw what, I'm not going to mention the American president's name or his son, who killed a critically endangered animal the other day for a prize. It was just for no reason. And also the bigger problem is our food supply, and we're clearing land everywhere. so we can graze cattle, or grow soybeans so we can feed the cattle. So throw a lot of water into that, and then we get to eat meat that's heavily subsidised by government. That's not the thing. But what I started to read was really interesting, intricate things that are going on. And I read this article about a porpoise in the Gulf of California in Mexico. It's called the vaquita. Has anyone heard of that one?
The vaquita?
The vaquita, yeah. Yeah. So it's in the Gulf of California in Mexico, and that was only discovered in the late 50s, that particular porpoise. And it's now the numbers are down between 6 to 12 porpoises alive. And they're not being hunted. They're just incidental to an illegal trade in this other fish called the totoaba. So this fish is being caught by the 8,000 or so illegal gill nets that are dropped into the Gulf of California. That's just catching everything in its way. So this dolphin, or this porpoise, it looks like a dolphin, but this little porpoise is just getting decimated as an incident to a highly illegal trade. So in this illegal trade is this fish, the totoaba. The bladder fetches up to $100,000 on the black market, right? So it's called the cocaine of the sea.
So what is the bladder being used for?
The bladder
Yeah,
is to treat things like cancer. And it's all rubbish. Like it's not.
So there's a whole bunch of superstition around
it's all
why
superstitious medicine. So yeah, so the link between the Mexican military, the government, the police, the cartels there, and
There's actually a film about that showed at the Sydney Film Festival.
yeah, you saw that, Sea of Shadows. Yeah, it's so worth seeing. If you haven't seen it, Sea of Shadows, it is absolutely worth seeing. But what's involved in that is also the drug trade and human trafficking. So we're talking really complicated problems where people are getting murdered so they can keep this trade going, right? That's the big problem, and that's some of the problem that we're facing. So when we start to think about what it is, it's all money, food, and land, and that's what's causing the problem. That's working better now.
You could hold it close. You said there was 4 themes, though. I want to make sure we cover those. So poaching was one of them.
Yep.
Food supply.
Yeah, food supply. So overgrazing, but also overexploitation. So we're just like the ocean.
Overutilising a resource.
Yeah. Climate change is a huge part of it as well, and pollution.
Got it.
So this hat I've got now, this Ilipica, it's that was only recently discovered as well, but their numbers are disappearing quickly, and because of pollution and because of land clearing. So they're losing their habitat. So this is all stuff that we're doing.
And so then this is a context for the basis of what you started. I'm sorry, there was a list online, 1,600 endangered animals.
1,800. So
1,800
extinct. That's what I found.
Okay.
And I stopped because it was like
that's enough.
So my then I started developing a list of critically endangered, but my focus was not just about how many critically endangered animals. I was looking at numbers.
Right.
And so the list that I've developed so far, I've got about 300 listings, and it's thousands, but I'm focusing on anything that's less than 2,000 left, and there are so many of them. The one with the lowest number is this thing called the Addax antelope in the Sahara, and that animal is being deliberately killed by security guards who are employed by Chinese oil companies who are exploring the desert for oil. So it's just there's nothing natural about that.
Right.
So we're doing it.
And so how does this obviously is the basis for them where you've taken this to think, okay, how do I insert myself into this or in some way apply myself to this problem? How did you make the leap from that to the alt saints? And let's explain what those are.
So there's the alt saints, a family of 4 saints, and they've each got a focus. So beasts, trees, bees and seas. Beasts being animals, trees being obviously plant life. Insects are another one because we're looking at an insect apocalypse right now, and seas just because of the choking oceans and the damage that we've done to them.
So what are these saints? Like if you haven't been to the website, it's kind of hard to visualise.
Oh yeah, so I'll talk about them.
Yeah,
Saint
great.
Frankie, he's based on. I grew up Catholic, and I'm still quite damaged by that. So I'm doing what most people do is like use their Catholic religion to do something out of that.
Even if they're maintaining it.
Well, so Saint Frankie is based on Saint Francis of Assisi, patron saint of animals. So all my characters are based on patron saints. Saint Dorothy is the patron saint of trees, so she's now Saint Dottie. Saint Ambrose is the patron saint of bees, and he's now Saint Buzz.
So hold on, there is a patron saint of bees already?
Yes, Saint Ambrose.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
I've got to hold the microphone like this. And Stella Maris, she's the protector of the oceans and of fishermen. So she's Saint Estelle, but really she's the Virgin Mary. That's another name for her. So I've got these 4 characters, and they look great, and they're very designed like Minecraft. Yeah. But so that's where I thought, okay, so we've got a whole lot of ecological problems to solve, and how do you do this in a way that is takes the drama and the blame out, but gives people something really simplified, but not dumbed down, but focuses on things that really matter. Like we've only got 3 Addax dolphins left, 3 Yangtze soft-shell tortoises. We've got 5 South China tigers. Those sort of things. Have a look at the website. There's a lot there. And then where I came to is the thing that's causing the most problems is humans and our consumption of food. So, of course, I have a design background, but I've also got a food background. I've had a number of food businesses over time. Some have been successful, others have been
In what definition of success?
Successful in that one made money and the others kind of got a great reputation so for doing things. So the last one was 10 years ago. I had a cafe in Redfern called Moose General Store, and we used to do amazing granola and got known for that. Time Out put us in as one of the top 5 cafes in Sydney. And I always wanted to hang on to those recipes because they took a long time to develop them. And the last few years I've had old customers try and contact me, say, can I have that recipe? And it's like, no. And I didn't know what I was going to do with them, but it's like, well, okay. So I started making these links between critically endangered animals and our consumption of everything and thinking, okay, so food is the problem. Wouldn't it be, it's not the problem, it's what we need, we're the problem, but wouldn't it be amazing to use the problem itself to then come in and solve the problem? So I've launched a range of granolas and working on some alternative milks right now. And they're all launching next year. So that's been quite a lot of fun redeveloping it. But then the purpose thing through that is sharing profits, 50% of the profits, with organisations who are actively working to save animals from becoming extinct. All right, so the first partner organisation established a relationship with his Rhino Rescue Project. They're in South Africa. And I met the founder, Lorinda. We've only had video chats. And her organisation, it costs $600 to do this treatment. And they inject the rhino horn with a dye and a toxin. So all these rhinos have got like pink horns and blue horns. And they look ridiculous. But
Festival rhino.
They don't care.
Penis enhancing horns.
What's that? What's that?
Not penis enhancing horns.
No, exactly. So all it is just it's collagen. That's So the dye is also infused with a toxin. So if a human tries to do something with it, hold it or ingest it, they don't die. Unfortunately, they get sick. There's 7.8 billion of us. Only a few of them left. So so that costs $600 to treat a rhino, and it lasts 3 years. What an awesome way to solve a problem. So so that's where the purpose part becomes finding these organisations who are doing things, often in a very creative way, to help stop what's going on. And it's a massively complicated problem, so it's not as simple as that, but it's starting somewhere. And then the next part of it is like putting investment into awareness and training. So there's a whole lot of organisations that do things like that and going into the areas where the problems are. So there's a whole lot of great programs happening in Vietnam right now around, and the kids are starting to respond and they're putting pressure on their parents. So there's a lot of good things amongst all the crap that we see. There's a lot of good things going on, and that's where I want to put.
And I want to come back on a couple of things here. So, quite often when you find someone has a kind of a personal itch to scratch, like in the case of we need to do something about endangered species as an umbrella term, they tend to set up a thing that then tries to solve that problem directly, ignoring that there's probably amazing people already applying themselves to that problem, and if you can channel and amplify into that, and so this is part of your kind of shtick here, is that you're actually filtering resources from everyday consumption, granola, milk, I think was the other one you just said.
So alternative milks and cereals.
As a way of actually saying we can amplify what these people are trying to do and connect to someone who's making an everyday purchase. How do you approach, how have you even found these companies or these ventures that are doing the work that you want to back?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of reach out over the last few months, and it hasn't been as welcoming as I thought it would be. I thought people would jump at it. And
they don't want to take additional money.
It's an unproven model. They don't know who I am. I could be, trying to sell them something.
But it's free money.
Dodgy. Yeah, I know. but it's not proven yet. So Lorinda saw it. Lorinda being the founder of Rhino Rescue Project, right. And straight away she goes, "Yes, this is great. She needs help." And my feeling on that is that it's just a matter of being able to prove, and also getting some reach,
right?
And once the product is in the market, start doing some marketing and
then how are you though finding these? Like, how did you even find Pink Rhino? I mean, I don't know, that's not their name obviously, but how did you even find them in the first place?
I've hired 2 researchers and a copywriter, and they're doing some of the work. So I asked them to look for these specific things,
right?
And they've done a pretty good job of doing it. But there's so many, and I do my own research as well. Right. There's another one in Vietnam called they're in England, but there's an animal called the Saola, which is like another sort of reindeer type animal.
Okay.
Down to 25 in Vietnam, and they're deliberately being killed.
Right.
So
there's a group who are working on that particular problem.
So they're the next one, but it takes time.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the actual products themselves, like how are you thinking about, like, I guess taking these to market? Like, how do people become not aware of the product from a sales perspective? That's a playbook. I'm more interested in how are people like making a connection with the brand and what it stands for. Like, I'm taken back to, I can't remember who it was, but the guy who used to sell the tomato sauces and used to have his name on them and his face on them and gave all the profits or whatever. Like, what's the mechanism through which people are actually connecting with the purpose and what it is that you're doing?
Well, I won't be having my face on anything. So. that's one thing. It's an interesting thing because I launched a Kickstarter campaign a couple of months ago, and I set the target quite high. It didn't fund, but it got a lot of interest. So I managed to get about 100 people supporting it.
Yeah.
And some of them I knew, through my network, but there were a whole lot of people who didn't know me. And they put money in. Some of them were putting some good money into the thing.
Right.
So that's one way. But it's about, I'm launching the online store. I'm working on that right now. And so by February, should have some products to sell online. So I'll do the typical digital marketing that you would expect.
Yeah. Which is your...
but even events, like, we were talking about this last week. So doing the first sort of interesting event. So I have a theory that dog lovers generally love animals. They do, right?
Show of hands.
Yeah. It's a fair assumption.
Fair call.
So it's like you don't
market
see that
testing
many really interesting events for dogs, right? And because my products are pretty much breakfast products
for dogs.
No, they're not. Don't you dare! Don't you dare! I'm getting off.
Could release that line.
No, well, I haven't thought about that.
Okay.
So, and I just launched it because it was just a whimsical idea that when we were talking last week, and I'm getting people with their dogs to come to a park in Maroubra on the 4th of January and calling it Dog's Breakfast.
I love it.
So, so they pay. I mean, the owners pay to get a bowl of cereal. They've got to bring their own dog treats, but the idea is just to bring people together, and with the purpose of talking about animals supporting other animals. It's kind of cool.
I think where I'm going with this is there is a kind of a standard marketing playbook to get a product and identify a customer need. But I think a lot of what happens in purpose-driven things, whether they're, commercial ventures or non-profit, there's an opportunity to connect around community and a sense of identity.
Yeah.
And, having a dog's breakfast, which is just genius name, if nothing else, is a way of actually getting a bunch of people who already identify with a particular way of thinking to be part of a narrative larger than themselves, and then in so doing, making connection with the brand or with the product or what it is that you're ultimately trying to do. And I guess that's part of what you're thinking is going to happen.
Yeah, it is definitely around that. And it's interesting. So the early stage concepts, quite a few people saw them, and there are a few people who are teachers or who've got kids at school, and they saw that, and they, like one woman who is a teacher, she's now using the materials that are online to teach kids around critically endangered animals and some of the environmental problems.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
That is great. So, that was an unexpected byproduct?
Completely unintended consequence. So, but I'm writing books as well. So I've already got the content, so formatting them into volumes around different regions. So again, the idea is to keep them at a low cost and make them available.
Right. Open source the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something about when you have a beautifully designed product, it affords you opportunities that don't otherwise happen.
Yeah.
If the things look amazing. I mean, I don't know if you can see the hat here, but it's got like a peel-off Velcro thing.
I change my animal every day.
You can change his animal every day, which I love. But the visual design of these things is beautiful, right? They're playful, right? They almost demand a curiosity to them, I think.
And that's the whole idea. It wasn't really didn't go out and decide that I'm going to do really cute, playful animals. Sure. It just kind of started to evolve that way.
Right. And you said just before you were talking about the food part of this is the first step, but then after that there is an education and awareness part. Is that what these books are innate of? Is it about trying to tell this larger narrative about the ecosystem this animal lives in or what the work that's being done?
So the products themselves have stories, so they're designed to have a mini story. So I read this thing a couple of months ago around one of the aha moments that Pepsi had in the 60s when they were really far behind. Coca-Cola was number 2 and they're still number 2. But one of the insights that they had, and it changed their marketing, was that people buy better versions of themselves. And that was one of those big things around there. And so when you look at the design, right, it's that there's a bit of a story. There's an emotional connection because it's like, bloody hell, we've got 5 of these animals left. Right. And the idea is that is the education for the product itself becomes an education piece. Yeah. So if they're buying a box of double chocolate granola, which is amazing, just letting you know, so it's they're buying that because apart from it being a great product, there's a story. There's
a degree of, we were talking about this in last week around behavioural economics. There's a degree of self-signalling that people are acting in a way that they believe to be true about themselves. Yeah. And so you're appealing to a fairly kind of primal thing that humans do, which is a status seeking and wanting to reaffirm the version of ourselves. We make purchasing decisions or wear certain clothes or whatever it is that we're doing, including hats.
They'll be available online soon as well. Just saying.
So you talked a little bit about kind of the arc of getting here with regards to taking the time off and the problem. Has this always been a part of like who you are and how you think? Like have you always thought I need to, you've had a design agency for I think a decade on and off. Yeah. Like where does this kind of purpose-led part come in?
I think it's just more and more as I've started to get more involved in the world and actually understand a bit more, not just read, but really, really understand what's going on. It's become one of my reasons for being is to see how I can use design, storytelling, product as well to do something that's a bit more meaningful than just sales. Right. So it hasn't always been the thing. I'm definitely not a salesperson. Right. But it's up until recently, it's been designing to solve business problems. Right. And they're important problems, first world problems. They're still problems to solve. But are they solving things for the future? Probably not.
Yeah, maybe not. Do you think there's an opportunity for you in this line of work to influence some of the decisions that happen in your other line of work in terms of them having a look at that and saying maybe we can, they can be an agent of change themselves? Do you see that? Does it flow across?
Yeah, it's starting to happen. I mean, even when I was running the school, so the purpose of that school was to give people opportunities to create meaningful change through their work. And that started to attract a very different type of person. So I think the education experience for me was the thing that started this because it was really, I was just looking to solve a talent problem when I decided to start up a school. But what I started to realise was when I could see people change in front of me because they've learned something new, that started to reflect back on how I felt about what I could do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Do you think, as a designer, you'd put that label on yourself, I presume?
What's that,
You'd
sorry?
put that label on yourself, a designer? You'd call yourself a designer?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of research that's been done about how design can be used to solve a bunch of problems. I think the example I love to give is when they wanted to change the diet of kids at American high schools, they just changed the order of the food. They put the salad at the start because then you turn up with the empty plate, you're super hungry, you put all the salad on, then you haven't got any room for the fries and the gravy or whatever else. And so design has an opportunity to make a massive impact. Yeah. Are you taking some leaf or some inspiration from other designers you think have made, massive impacts? And they may not be specifically purpose-led. Like, where are you getting your own inspiration from, I guess is the question.
That's a really good question. I look at a lot of sort of general popular culture because you get two camps of people. There's those who are very, very showy, who are in it for the glam. Right. But then there's those who have got a message to carry. Right. So I don't even like her music that much. I do, but like Lady Gaga, she's one of my people who I really admire.
Your muses.
Well, she's awesome. Like,
Okay.
She's actually doing really good things.
Okay.
More than just being
As in challenging and just different?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like working with kids who around their own identity,
Right.
self-esteem, things like that. That's where change has to happen. Is
Yeah, sure.
how a person feels about themselves. So I look at her and I think, yeah, she's pretty awesome. And then Ellen, her quest for saving critically endangered gorillas.
Yeah.
There's that. In terms of other designers, I work with. I've been in the UX user experience design space for years, and just naturally, the people who drift to that sort of field
Right.
are really empathic, and they care about solving problems.
Right.
So that it's the industry itself that's kind of really made me
Right. More empathetic.
interested in doing. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that because we interviewed a lady in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, probably won't come out for a couple of months, and she was working in an agency, and it's an agency in San Francisco. Most of their clients, I'm presuming, are tech companies and the like. But so much of where she was applying what she was doing in health outcomes was around trying to apply design thinking and even marketing thinking to a degree in changing, behaviours so that we change health outcomes. And she said it was the same thing. She said more and more the agencies are finding that their opportunity as designers and marketers is not in selling product but in inspiring change, and that might include the sale of a product. But the briefs that are interesting are these challenging briefs that require some degree of bravery. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, because I'm seeing that more and more. Like the more people are exposed to the value of proper design, not just design for the sake, like not just visual design,
Right.
which is hugely important, but design in terms of systems design.
Right.
Because we're talking about fundamentally shifting how systems work, and that's the important bit. Is
Systems and thinking, or
it's about systems thinking, but it's also systems design.
Actually,
because there's no singular problem that doesn't have a dependency on other things.
Right.
And that's where it's starting to get more and more interesting. Is anyone in design here, in the design field? Yeah, what sort of design?
UX.
You are. See, I knew you were a nice person. What's that? Oh, did you? Okay, and you knew? Oh, awesome. So we're always solving problems, right? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Just I want to come back, and we're sort of diving back a bit, which is fine. But just understanding this, and I had this misunderstanding. We caught up for coffee or breakfast last week, and I had this kind of internal narrative of like, not why shouldn't we, save a species, but what does it achieve when we apply all this energy? And there was something that you explained to me that points back to this idea of dependencies and the fact that there's a system that has a problem, not a species that has a problem. I just want to actually go back and understand that a bit more, because I think that is kind of a good reflection of what we're talking about generally, which is these systems have dependencies. So where we have a species that is endangered, there's only 7 of them left, what typically is going on in that environment, like beyond the species not existing?
Well, see, nothing exists in isolation. So that's where humans are a little bit dumb still, in that we think that we sit above everything, but we don't. We're part of an entire, let's call it an ecosystem.
Sure.
For that. So I'll use, say, the corroboree frog. Actually, no, I'm going to use the kakapo. Anyone heard of that?
The what?
Yeah, love it. It's an amazing, the kaka. What's that?
What's it called? The catapult frog.
Yeah, it's a New Zealand. No, it's a bird in New Zealand.
Oh, sorry.
Like a parrot. They're amazing. And there's some hilarious videos. Their population started to get decimated because of introduced species and also diseases. Okay. So they weren't hunted. They weren't. But they started to get decimated because of things that we were doing, introducing the species, thinking that look at the cane toad. Yeah. What a great idea that was. Pardon?
Australian possums, apparently.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of stuff. There's a whole lot of things that, because we think that we're solving one problem. Come on.
Our New Zealand contingent. Not to say anything about the New Zealanders coming to Australia.
I just keep saying humans. It's like it always comes down to humans, because animals don't make these decisions. We do. Like we introduce things, and then there's this massive flow-on effect.
Right.
And so if we're looking at one a threatened or endangered or critically endangered thing,
right.
This belongs to something that is dependent on it, and it is dependent on something else. So again, like I'll use maybe the crabberry frog in Australia. That is kind of like the canary in the coal mine for rainforests,
right?
Because that is by it contracting all these diseases and numbers are down to like a ridiculous level, and they can't keep getting reintroduced. They're breeding them at Taronga Zoo,
right.
But there's a whole lot of problems with reintroduction, and that is a really big indication of everything else that's going on: pollution, air quality, land clearing, other species coming into its turf, and habitat shrinking. So it's not just about the frog.
Sure.
It's about everything else that exists around it.
Yeah, I understand. And is it usually that the frog is both the canary but also is critical to the whole thing working?
Yeah.
It's usually the other side of it.
Yeah.
Very good. Hey, I'm mindful of time. I'm mindful that people's Tuesday night, but I want to just sort of open it up a little bit. I talked a little bit about people who inspire you from a design perspective. I'm interested in the other systems that people are working on that you find interesting, which could be, purpose-led, could be just generally people are doing interesting work, probably people we should interview. And then also the other thing I like to ask is, in a world where there's a lot to be done, often it can be challenging because you have to somehow take yourself out of that. I'm interested to know how you cope's probably too strong a word, but how do you cope? Like, how do you get away from it, or like, what are your own mechanisms to be able to have a bit of zen in a world where there's still a lot of things to be done?
Yeah, I cook. That's how I decompress.
Yeah,
I do that a lot. I've moved down near the beach down south, so that helps a lot. Is being away from the city environments. That's how my coping, but also I work.
Right,
and the work
helps.
It does for me. My work, the work I'm doing now. Helps because the problems are so vast and they're so deep, and if I get depressed, I just go back in and start working on it because it's so easy to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, sure. I wasn't expecting the answer at work.
Yeah, yeah, but it's just like work being
applying yourself to what you enjoy doing, right?
What I'm creating. So, so I find that helps me quite a lot.
Yeah, and then the other people you think are doing amazing work.
God, there's so many people.
Just one
doing,
or just two.
Okay, I met this guy about a month ago. He's an Indigenous guy. He's 26 years old, and I got introduced to him. He's rugby player. He's just finished his degree in anthropology. He's about to do his master's in anthropology. He's from Broome, WA, and I didn't know much about him. Somebody just said, "You've got to meet this guy," and I did. And oh my God, 26 years old. At 26 years old, I had no clue, and that wasn't that long ago. Shush. Yeah, it was.
Hence the disclaimer.
So his name's Scott Wilson. So he's an artist. So he's just finished his degree in anthropology. He's setting up a production company to do cartoons and animations to tell stories of country.
Right.
He's a footballer. His mum. I was talking about Indigenous food, and his mum in the 80s wrote what is still referred to as the book on Indigenous food.
Right.
His uncle has this nut farm in somewhere up in northwest Australia, where he's producing soft drinks, beers, all these amazing things. So he's got this whole world of people in his world that are doing really amazing stuff around storytelling, around environmental awareness, around activism.
He's 26.
Yes, he's 26 years old, and the guy is just. I felt absolutely inadequate next to him. Like,
perfect. How inspiring.
But I don't know 26-year-olds who are doing anything like what he's doing. So he's probably the most inspiring person I've met, apart from you guys and you, in the last. But that was only a month ago.
Yeah.
So I've caught up with him 3 times now, and we're talking about things that we can do next year.
Yeah, awesome.
Particularly around Indigenous enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Maybe the takeout from that as well is that there's absolutely, in fact, starting this a month ago, pretty much, there's a ton of people doing really interesting, exciting stuff, and there's a normality in what they're doing, right? They haven't sort of come in on a horse and suddenly exalted themselves. They've just got up one day and said, well, I'm going to work on this corner of this problem, and they've started in a small area doing some cartooning or whatever it is that sort of was the start of that journey. I obviously don't know. Yeah. I think that's a super good takeout. All right, we're allowed to stay here for another hour or so, have another drink, and thank you all.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.